Each and every week, there are players that are in better spots or performed extremely well, making them skyrocket up the fantasy rankings. There are goalies that are playing better. There are defensemen and forwards that are continuing to up their game and be extremely strong fantasy performers on your team or your league mates' teams. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 players that I think are currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings given their current performance or their recent play and opportunity. My name's Mike, and let's jump into the video. Evan Bouchard is the perfect player to lead off this video with. I recently released my top 10 defensemen for the rest of the season. Got a lot of comments about Evan Bouchard, how people think he is a top 5 defenseman for the rest of the season. And I can see that. I just want to see a little bit more from Bouchard, who has blossomed into a #1 defenseman on an Edmonton Oilers team that we all know have been struggling in the early going. So far this season, 19 games, he's at a point per game pace, 60 shots, 28 blocks, 9 points on the power play, and played a career high 21 minutes and 50 seconds. The minutes was a big thing for me with Bouchard this season. I was hoping he would get top 4 minutes and on that power play 1, which is where defensemen succeed across the league and more especially on the Edmonton Oilers. Right now with Bouchard, he's been extremely productive to start the season. 8.68 shots per 60, ranks 3rd amongst all defensemen. He's a guy who historically has a very strong shot rate, so it's really promising to see him sustain that. A 60.2 Corsi 4 per 60, which is shot attempts. He ranks 7th amongst defensemen, and right now he's at 2.75 points per 60, ranking him 4th amongst all defensemen. What you've gotten from Bouchard is a defenseman who was the 11th defenseman off the board that is now performing as a top 5 player on an Edmonton Oilers team who not only is their power play, but their entire offense is struggling. Last season, they had 13.23 goals for per 60 rate on the power play. This season, 10.85. They still have the 5th most efficient power play in the entire NHL. Last season, they were above and beyond every single team. They had 2 players with 60 plus power play points. With Bouchard here, the big notable thing is that he's still at a point per game pace, even though the Edmonton Oilers offense and team as a whole has been lackluster. So if this team catches fire at some point, which I'm assuming we all expect that to happen, you can see Bouchard getting an even better point pace than he's currently at, which would definitely skyrocket him up the fantasy rankings more than he is right now. If you've drafted Bouchard, he has been an extremely strong defenseman for you. I've taken him in a few leagues. He's been my #1 D all around, and we should continue to see his production for the rest of the season. Sticking with the Edmonton Oilers, we have Evander Kane, who has been just doing Evander Kane things. If you've drafted him, if you're in those bangers leagues, he has been a top performer for you or ultimately a league winner. In October, he was off to a slow start, but since he got benched, he's been extremely good. In October, 8 games played, just 2 goals, 6 points. But the reason why we like Evander Kane so much is because of how high that floor is. 39 shots and 34 hits. So even though he wasn't putting up points on the score sheet, he was still providing you with a lot of shots and a lot of hits each and every game. Now, jumping over to November, the puck finally started to go into the back of the net. 7 goals, 11 points, 39 shots, and he's continuing that great shot and hit rate with 32 hits to add on top of the awesome point production you're getting from him. I think the craziest thing, and I have this as my 4th bullet here, my 5th bullet, is that he may in fact be the most productive non-power play 1 player in the entire league. He's right now on pace for 39 goals, 34 points, 267 shots, and 284 hits, and he does not skate on the top power play unit. A 40 goal pace on non-power play 1. I think he might be the only player in the league. I would love to know if you have anything to say in the comments below about other players that are currently not skating on the top power play unit with this sort of production. Evander Kane, you pretty much drafted a guy at ADP 113 that's giving you very similar to Brady Tkachuk numbers. Can he sustain this for the rest of the season? The scoring, maybe not, but the shots and hit volume we've seen throughout his entire career and his entire career in Edmonton. That's what Evander Kane will give you, an elite shot and hit mix, as well as some really good scoring upside. He skates in the top 6. We know the struggles with Edmonton. I just mentioned it with Bouchard. But seeing this sort of production from Evander Kane, especially early on, is very promising. He's been a top 30 skater overall, especially in leagues with hits and shots. he has been an even better performer than that. I can see him sustaining this production for the rest of the season. Maybe the goal scoring goes down, but those shots and hits are where the key parts for Evander Kane are, which makes up his floor and is the reason why he has been an extremely strong player in the first quarter of the season. At the time of recording, just 36% of you are subscribed to the channel, so if you've enjoyed the content so far, make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all the content that we're going to be pumping out for the rest of the season. In addition, we have updated our projections for the rest of the season. If you're interested in gaining access to that, head on over to our Patreon. The link will be in the description. If you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment in this video or simply message me on Discord. Let's jump back into the video, guys. You thought that I was going to make a video and not include Michael Matheson in this. He has been unbelievable. I've been polling the community each and every week, just saying, who were your top performers from last week? Who was very good for you? And the name Mike Matheson just continues to pop up. He has blossomed into a top 7 to 10 fantasy defenseman, a guy that was going pretty much undrafted. I was trying to make sure that all the viewers of FantasyPuck were on the Mike Matheson train. Either you drafted him, you traded for him, or hopefully you picked him up. He's actually my most owned defenseman across all my leagues, and he has been extremely good. He's currently pair 1, power play 1, played massive minutes, and there's really no competition. Caden Gooley is an extremely good defenseman. He just plays a completely different style of game where he's more defensive minded, where Mike Matheson is like a Tony DeAngelo and he plays purely offensively. His current rank so far this season, he ranks 8th for average time on ice at 24 minutes and 50 seconds. He has the 10th best shot rate amongst all defensemen, and he currently ranks 16th for points amongst all defensemen. Not to mention, he has an extremely strong block rate. He's been very good on the power play. His 82 game pace so far this season, 21 goals, 43 assists, 38 power play points, 228 shots, and 181 blocks. I do expect this power play point production to eventually come back down to earth. Montreal's power play has been very good to start the season, but when this comes back down to earth, you can expect Matheson's production to slow down a little bit, but still be very good. He plays huge minutes in a very highly offensive role, and that's what you want from your defenseman in fantasy, especially if you're in those goals, assists, power play point type leagues. With Matheson here, if you drafted him, he's definitely been a league winner for you. He is definitely skyrocketing up the rankings right now, as I mentioned, as a top 7 to 10 fantasy defenseman after being taken in the 200 plus in some leagues. I really didn't want to include a goalie in this video because goalies have been absolutely impossible to predict this season. We've seen a couple good starts in a row from Sorokin now, but with Cam Talbot here, if I told you in the preseason he was in my must draft goalies video that he would be the #1 goalie in the entire NHL right now, you'd probably tell me I was crazy. But the big thing with goaltenders, and I always say this, is that you want to draft goalies that have very good teams in front of them. And I've said this a few times before as well, where I do think they have the best 3 centers in the entire NHL in terms of first, second, and third line in their depth. Maybe McDavid and Draisaitl, as both of them are very good as a pair, but that third line center, Ryan McLeod, just doesn't really take the cake over Dubois, Deneau, and Anze Kopitar. They are just an extremely deep team, a very strong D-core. I love everything about this team, and that's what we're seeing from Cam Talbot. He went undrafted to a early season league winner. His ownership percentage has gone up from 20% to 86%. I took him in a few leagues. I didn't really go through my own advice. I was really high on Markstrom. That's someone I've been taking in all of my teams. But with Cam Talbot here, if you drafted him, if you picked him up, he's been a top performer. He, through 14 starts, is a 10-3-1 record, a 202 goals against average, and a 931 save percentage. He's the early season Vezina winner so far. I don't know if this is sustainable, but the big thing you want to keep in mind is, can the LA Kings continue to be a top 5 team for the rest of the season? And I think yes, because of their depth, their experience. They've done it before. They still have some of their core from that Stanley Cup team with Doughty and Kopitar to lead the way. There's so much to like from this LA Kings team. There's so much to like from Cam Talbot, who is taken over as the #1 starter, but Phoenix Copley has still been pretty good as his backup. The tandem together is a very strong duo. If you own them in fantasy, or if you're able to own them in fantasy, it's definitely what you want to be doing. But so far this season, Cam Talbot has skyrocketed into a top 5 goalie, potentially for the rest of the season. I'm very curious to see what ends up happening with a lot of these top goalies who are currently struggling, and if they can kind of find their game, or just their team in front of them can start to play a little bit better. Another defenseman that has been extremely strong this season, I would say with Matheson, we were kind of able to predict it because we knew last year he was the #1 guy in Montreal. With Dobson, he was the #1 guy last year. We just haven't seen the minutes escalate to where we wanted to, but we finally are this year. Back in 2021, he was playing around 21 minutes, which was a career high for him. And then just last season, his minutes dropped a little bit to just over 20 minutes per night. And there was really no reason for us to say, yeah, Dobson's going to play that #1 role, play 24 plus minutes, because it just doesn't fit in the Islanders system. But so far this year, he's been extremely good while playing more minutes. 16 points, 48 shots, 51 blocks, 8 points on that top power play unit while playing 25 minutes per night. One of the biggest increases amongst all defensemen, especially defensemen in the top 25 range. And that's what you want to see from defensemen. That's what you want to see from just players in general. Amongst all defensemen, he currently ranks 7th for time on ice. He has the 10th most shot attempts, the 7th most points, and the 8th most blocks. He has an extremely high floor with potential to have 200 shot, 200 block season like Jacob Trouba would do, except he has the power play 1 and the point production to add to that. He was the 21st defenseman off the board. Hopefully you got to him in some of your leagues, and I got him 91st in the FantasyPuck Patreon league as my defenseman #3. I just wanted to go back in the draft and see where I grabbed him, and he has been a top performer on my defensive end and really rounded out my D-core. His current 82 game pace, 65 points, 32 points on the power play, 196 shots, and 209 blocks. That would put him in a top 5 to 7 defenseman range. He is definitely skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings right now. I want to say draft boards, but my mind is just, it's in draft mode right now, but it should be in regular season mode. He is a very, very strong defenseman for the rest of the season. In his last 5 games, he's played 26, 24, 22, 30 and 28 minutes. Very promising from Noah Dobson, who has blossomed into a #1 defenseman on an Islanders team that is desperate for offense. So hopefully, and what we've seen early is that Dobson has been providing that for this team. Joel Eriksson Ek, or better known as Jeek to some people, given the name. Through 19 games this season, he has been extremely good, extremely productive on a Minnesota Wild team that hasn't been very good this season. Through 19 games, 10 goals, 17 points, 7 points in the power play, 66 shots, 20 blocks, and 27 hits. He's done it all. And for me, going into this season, my strategy was more so drafting defensemen and good wingers because there were so many of them, and then taking these very high productive and high floor forwards like Joel Eriksson Ek and Vincent Trocheck to really round out my team. And that strategy has really paid off, especially with how good Eriksson Ek has been. He is on pace right now for 43 goals. He set a career high last year with 31. But to top that off, 73 points, 30 power play points, 284 shots, and 116 hits. He has the upside to easily be, and he currently is, a top 30 to 50 skater amongst all leagues. And like I mentioned, this Minnesota Wild team, I'm getting a lot of questions about Kirill Kaprizov. They haven't been as good as we've seen in the past, especially offensively, yet Joel Eriksson Ek continues to be productive. He's playing a career high 20 minutes and 27 seconds on a line 3 power play 1 role. When you're playing over 20 minutes, you're not really playing a line 3 role, so I really wouldn't put any justification to that. But I'm really surprised to see his roster percentage at just 88%. His ADP in preseason was 143, and he has now been a top performer for you for the entire season. Hopefully you were able to get to Eriksson Ek in any of your drafts or trade for him. He's been an extremely productive player, and his fantasy value continues to skyrocket up the board. Finally, the last player to conclude this video, Ryan O'Reilly of the Nashville Predators. It's been a full-on resurgence season for O'Reilly, who was traded to Toronto last season, played more of a third-line role, but was a very good performer in playoffs for them. Through 19 games, 10 goals, 18 points, 9 points in the power play, 45 shots, and 15 blocks. 10 goals on 45 shots is a little bit worrisome, and his shooting percentage is really inflated right now. He's currently at a 43 goal pace. Do I think this is sustainable? Definitely not. But what I did is I extrapolated his shooting percentage over the last 3 seasons, multiply that by his current shot rate over 82 games, and that projects for 30 total goals for Ryan O'Reilly, who's just 40% rostered. It's pretty rare that you can find a 30 goal scorer in your free agency, but with O'Reilly, he is a little bit limited because he's a center. But for managers that are in those 14 plus team leagues that don't really have those elite number 1, 2, and 3 centers, O'Reilly has been an extremely strong performer for you, and we can see this going for the rest of the season. He's taking in a massive role right now, line 1, power play 1. There's no competition up the middle in Nashville right now, so he should continue to be playing in this really, really good role. and a very highly offensive spot on that top power play unit with Philip Forsberg, who's been extremely strong this season. There's a lot to like from O'Reilly. Just keep in mind that shooting percentage is a little bit inflated, but regardless, his value and his ranking has been going up the ladder quite a bit over the last couple weeks, and hopefully we continue to see that for the rest of the season. That will do it for these 7 players that are skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.